After my recent video about Ristic Study, I got a lot of comments saying one specific thing. What about Sol Ring? Why is it that Ristic Study should be banned, but not this all-powerful fast mana piece? Bits and pieces of my answer to that question are sitting around in plain sight. As I mentioned in that video, the reason to ban things is having a high power level plus having a bothersome play pattern, and I find the play pattern of Sol Ring less bothersome than that of Ristic. Not a very high bar, I know, but the ring has cleared it. I also had a segment in a 30-minute Defense of Tutors I put out last year where I discussed what causes cards to feel problematic, and why a very early game threat like Sol Ring feels less game warping than other very powerful cards that exist. Not ungame warping, but less game warping. Still, I think it's worth returning to the question of Sol Ring and asking some questions about it, and giving the question of whether it should stay legal a fair shake. I still firmly lean on the side of not banning it currently, and I'll be laying out my reasons for feeling that way, but the arguments in favor of a ban are also fascinating, and I love being fascinated. Sol Ring is a card that can really jumpstart an aggressive game plan, and if you're looking for other ways to get your speed on, look no further than the Red Collection from this video's sponsor, Voidmonster. Voidmonster.org is a TCG-inspired accessory and apparel shop started by artist Forrest ML, and every month there's a new drop featuring some fantastic original designs that's only available to pre-order for 1 week. This week is the Red Collection, which features a deck box, sleeves, a playmat, and a card binder, all with variations of this red pattern, with these sort of rocky, magma-y details that I really dig. As always, these are some super cool accessories available only for a limited time, and if you're interested in them, you should follow my link in the description and pre-order by March 1st at noon PST. Thanks to Voidmonster for sponsoring the video. Okay, so we're going to start with the play patterns of Sol Ring, and why I find them sometimes problematic, but unobjectionable a lot of the rest of the time. The card's most obvious feature is that it warps early games. Turn 1 Sol Ring, as well as its mean older brother, Turn 1 Sol Ring Arcane Signet, can really set a player up for a nasty Turn 2 and Turn 3. I think most casual EDH players have been flattened by a killer Sol Ring rollout in their time, but that earliness of Sol Ring is actually a reason why I don't always mind it so much. Turn 1 Sol Ring is amazing, Turn 2 Sol Ring is also pretty juicy, but what if you draw into it on Turn 3? How about Turn 4 or 5? At a certain point, you might not even want to draw into this little guy, and that points to something important about the card, its ephemeral nature. To briefly return to a metaphor I used last year, Sol Ring is strongest when it comes earliest in the pipeline toward victory, but it falls off fast compared to a lot of other especially powerful cards. Smothering Tithe is another card that offers a lot of mana for its cost, but in that case the mana is dynamic in how quickly it gets generated, it's storable, and since it's in the form of treasures, it can also enable some powerful artifact synergies. It's still just mana, but it's a decidedly more scalable and flexible form of mana. Next up along the pipeline might be a powerful draw engine like Ristic Study or the One Ring. A strong flow of cards will almost always be useful, whether that be in an early setup turn or for when a player is drawing their way toward a kill. The potency of one of these could be limited by the amount of mana a player has, but drawing cards can also draw into ways to solve a player's mana issues, so for most decks this will be a temporary limitation, if even one at all. Finally, we could talk about a powerful endgame card that will usually spell out victory if a player is ahead, and could give a shot at swinging the game back around if they're behind. Bolas's Citadel is a very powerful card, and the point in a player's game plan where it fits in is often quite far along, just before a player is looking to win. Alright, so what am I trying to say by constructing this scale? Well, it's a useful data point for analyzing cards that most people would consider powerful. Let's consider how often a Bolas's Citadel will feel especially powerful, maybe even too powerful for some games. The answer to that might vary a bit by table, but I'm willing to bet it's reasonably frequent that this card feels out of place. That's not any sort of complaint about the card. I love Bolas's Citadel, but it is an interesting fact about it, and it's a fact that has a lot to do with the point in the game at which this card is powerful. If a Bolas's Citadel hits the table, the game will usually be over if its controller is allowed to untap with it, and it might even be over the same turn it was played with the right setup. This means that the social tools of the EDH format, the fact that you have two other opponents in the game basically, aren't very useful at dealing with Bolas's Citadel. If people happen to have big boards right now and are able to get an opportunity to swing big at the Bolas's Citadel player, that could be a good way of containing the card, but it's kind of rare that your options will be this good unless the Citadel haver played it when they were pretty far behind. More realistically, the other players at the table will get maybe a single turn cycle to either come up with a piece of artifact removal or have their own crazy pop-off turn, and if neither of those things happen, you're kinda cooked. This stands in contrast to the way things play out with a card that is powerful earlier in the game. A powerful draw engine like Braids or Toski can generate a lot of card advantage if not addressed, but these are significantly more manageable through the social nature of the format since they won't be typically winning the game super imminently. If somebody is getting a lot of cards off of one of these, their opponents can attack them and or interact with some of their stuff in order to slow them down. This is even more true for a mana tool like Sol Ring that comes into play early. It will absolutely accelerate the game plan of its caster, but in a bracket 2 or 3 game, there will typically still be a lot of turns for the table to work together against the Sol Ringing player before a win is threatened. To be clear, this is not to say Sol Ring will never be a problem. If the player who draws it is playing the strongest deck, if that player draws other powerful stuff in conjunction with the ring, if one or more of their opponents has a rough start, all of these could result in Sol Ring causing a blowout, turning an uphill battle into a non-game. This absolutely does happen sometimes, but it's not the norm of the card in my experience. More frequently, players do get ample opportunity to gang up on the Sol Ring player, and that's assuming it's a problem at all. Many a player has kept a questionable hand with a Sol Ring in it, and in those cases, it's pretty common to see a scary first 3 turns followed by a rather unconcerning turns 4, 5, and 6. Another factor that's worth considering with regard to banning a card is how much a card dominates the landscape of a particular game it's in. If the legends about Primeval Titan are to be believed, it basically transformed the Commander format into the Primeval Titan format for a year or so, with everybody playing it and stealing it and copying it in order to get their favorite lands out onto the board as fast as possible. The same goes for Prophet of Kruphix, instantly transforming a game into a Prophet of Kruphix game the second it hit the field. This can even be the case for Rhystic Study. A player getting to draw a lot of extra cards might trivialize any other set of value engines they were playing, turning their game plan from insert complex synergy web here into Rhystic Study. End of story. In contrast to these examples, Sol Ring is humble and task-oriented. It enables a player's game plan early on, but the card lacks any sort of identity or scaling, so after a few turns it often slips into the background. I've had multiple games recently where I entirely forgot it had been played, only remembering about it after a moment of marveling at how sleek and tuned an opponent's deck had seemed. To be clear, this isn't necessarily a perfect defense of a powerful card. You could make similar arguments about Mana Crypt and Jeweled Lotus, and I'm perfectly happy with them staying banned. Still, I do see some appeal in the fact that this is a universally available tool that can give players a chance to play an accelerated version of their game plan. To me, getting to be the big bad is one of the defining experiences of playing EDH, and it's an experience that everybody deserves access to. Now, just to be clear, I have seen some bad defenses of Sol Ring that argue that it's a tool of the people, an equalizing factor between the stronger players and the weaker players out there, or the stronger decks and the weaker decks. These are bad defenses because anybody can draw Sol Ring, including the strongest player, and I prefer a modified defense of the card that focuses on its ability to increase early game variance. Increased variance won't necessarily create fairer games, nor is fairness a particularly good metric for analyzing Commander games in the first place. But what it can do is create more balanced play experiences on the aggregate, offering exciting games to players playing decks that might otherwise be slower. And that's worth something. So ultimately, I've grown a bit more tolerant of Sol Ring over the past couple years, even as I remain a fairly variance-averse player. Random power spikes in a game plan can make for frustratingly unpredictable play experiences, making it impossible to predict opposing decks and strategize. A deck looking very different power-wise game to game can also make it tricky to set the table up for success, to find a pairing of decks that will result in something satisfying for everyone involved. In principle, this logic could provide a reason for me to hate Sol Ring, but the profile of the card manages to minimize some of the issues that significant power level variance can cause. Being strong early means it is a thing that can be considered strategically right from the outset of a game, and this feature also offers plenty of time for players to collaborate in dealing with a Sol Ring-fueled game plan. Being a background enabler whose presence in a game diminishes over time does mitigate some of the power spike it provides. A deck that drew Sol Ring will usually feel much faster, but it will still feel like a version of itself, rather than a mid-range deck that is transformed into a combo deck or something. The biggest remaining issue I see with Sol Ring is that sometimes the strongest deck at the table will get it, and that deck will then get to wipe the floor in a way it might not have otherwise. This undeniably does add to the difficulty in constructing successful Commander games, adds to the uncertainty of how much power level difference between decks is too much. Whether that fact overshadows the other aspects of the card I brought up is up to you. Alright, let's move on to the logistics of banning Sol Ring. I wanted to separate the theoretical case for banning Sol Ring from the practical case for banning it, in large part because I find the practical case for banning Sol Ring almost impossible to really consider, an insurmountably challenging proposition. It's been printed in every single precon since 2011, and it's played in over 80% of decks according to EDHREC. Banning Sol Ring would be a massive and monumental undertaking, requiring a prolonged communication campaign to reach all sectors of the player base. I think we as EDH players on the internet have a tendency to assume the community as a whole is far more cohesive and engaged than they really are. Like, surely these spicy musings on Reddit or YouTube are an accurate reflection of the player base. But no, the EDH format is full of people who don't consume much content about it, who haven't heard the latest announcement about the bracket system, who don't pay much attention to current sets, who don't spend a whole lot of time building decks, and who don't get together to play more than once a month, if that. Take a moment to think about it. For a 60-card format, the people playing it competitively will be actively listening for ban updates, because that affects the metagame, and also seems to happen a lot now. We can also think about the average Commander player who ran Jeweled Lotus or Mana Crypt, or even the still legal Rhystic Study. These players will be relatively in tune with the Commander format compared to most players, and will be able to actively receive any news about these cards getting banned. Meanwhile, if Sol Ring was banned, the median Sol Ring player would probably hear about it 3 months later and go, "Oh, why? Okay, guess I have some swaps to make." In addition to being challenging to fully convey to the player base, banning Sol Ring would also fundamentally muddy all Wizards of the Coast communication about the Commander format. Precons serve as an example of what Commander deck building looks like, the tools it should use, the features it should have, and on a fundamental level, how the format works. To ban a card that WotC has chosen to put in every precon would destroy any sort of messaging consistency about what the format means, and would make any future messaging power significantly weaker. In this way, I do think part of the discussion of a Sol Ring ban is a sign of the times. A lot of Commander players kind of want to undermine WotC's relationship with the Commander format, which feels weird to say out loud, but I don't think the people who feel that way would disagree with that assessment. It is also, admittedly, very funny to demand that Hasbro does something as supremely stupid as banning Sol Ring, and after all the destructive, profit-driven decisions of the past few years, it's hard to deny there might be a little schadenfreude in watching them try and recover from that fumble. But the angst that bubbles in the hearts of us terminally online Commander players isn't great as a genuine justification for something like a Sol Ring ban. In the real world, weighing a ban unfortunately does need to involve considering the impact of that ban in practical terms, in addition to theoretical reasoning. In the case of Sol Ring, on a theoretical level, I'm relatively ambivalent about it. I see the issues the card has and its very high power level, but I also see some genuine reasons why people like it, so my feelings probably end up basically a wash. When we consider the practical consequences, though, it's kind of just an obvious non-starter. A card that has been printed and handed to the casual player base as much as Sol Ring would have to be noxious to be worth going to the trouble of banning. Utterly miserable and pleasure-destroying on every possible level. And whatever issues you may have with Sol Ring, they probably don't rise to that level. This does bring up a question, though. What exactly constitutes a good practical reason not to ban a card? Being extremely widely printed to players who are on the most casual fringes of a format seems like a pretty good logistical reason not to ban a card to me. But what about other things? How far do practicality arguments extend? One of these practical reasons to keep a card unbanned might be popularity, and my reasoning around Sol Ring is arguably a version of this. However, realistically, what I care about most heavily here is inclusion in precons. If a card has shown up in more than half of precon sets ever released, I'm going to be a little leery of banning it, since it's been purposefully put in the hands of a lot of more casual players. But what if it's just a card that a lot of people happen to play? That could be perfectly fine. Cards do need to be some degree of popular in the first place to be ban-worthy, after all. We're not going to ban something that has no presence and therefore no impact. Another practical consideration that sometimes comes up is price. A card being expensive is a reason not to ban it, so the reasoning could go, because banning it will financially impact players and game stores alike, destroying value for no good reason. My problem with this reason is extremely simple. It also applies to reprints. Every price-based argument for not banning something like Mana Crypt, or for not banning Rhystic Study now, also works as an argument to not reprint these cards, for fear of tanking the price that way. And that's kind of a problem, right? Most people would consider it a good thing for Wizards of the Coast to print more of the cards people want to play with. You could consider a ban somewhat optically different than mass reprints, like it's seen as a somewhat more aggressive maneuver by the player base, but that's splitting hairs as far as I'm concerned. The same price-based logic is getting employed, and it's not any sort of logic that deserves to see the light of day. A final practical reason worth discussing is iconicness, how symbolically relevant a card is on the scale of the Commander format. In my Rhystic Study video, I laid out why I don't put a whole lot of salt in the iconicness of a card, but at the same time, I suspected that Rhystic Study would stick around for at least a bit longer on the back of its iconic status. And the ban announcement 4 days later confirmed that prediction. While the card isn't quite as iconic as Sol Ring, there is an undeniable pedigree there. It's a card that was printed 6 years before the formation of the Rules Committee, a card whose strange design made it dead on arrival in 1v1 formats, but also offered it a chance at new life in the 4-player Commander format. It's a card that's powerful, that's widely played, and that draws attention to itself by its very design. None of these are bulletproof reasons not to ban a card, and indeed I find them inadequate as reasons to keep Rhystic Study legal, but it's also not hard to imagine why other people might find them adequate. The question of whether to ban Rhystic Study, along with that of Sol Ring or any other card, comes down to how problematic it is on a play pattern level versus how challenging and harmful a ban would be on a practical level. Ultimately, I wouldn't be surprised to see a Rhystic Study ban a little ways down the line, but that'll require the theoretical reasons to ban it surpassing the practical reasons not to ban it in the minds of the community in general and the Commander format panel in specific. I certainly have strong feelings about those theoretical reasons, but my feelings are not the consensus opinion. Yet. We can call that a work in progress, I suppose. Thanks for watching, and thanks to Architect for supporting the channel. Did you know that you can click and drag cards from category to category in Architect? I always forget, but it's very fun to do whenever I remember, and definitely helpful in making deck building a little quicker. A link to all of my decks is in the description. Also supporting the channel is Dragon Shield. If you're looking for durable sleeves in a great range of different colors, you can follow my affiliate link down in the description for 5% off your sleeve order. Finally, thank you to my lovely supporters on YouTube and Patreon, some of whom are on screen now. I'll probably put together a bonus segment about why I don't think game-changing Sol Ring makes sense sometime in the next couple days, and if you want access to that or my back catalog of bonus videos, you can sign up for my Patreon or for a YouTube membership.